Brutal loss for Boston College. Does this mean more issues that we're going to be dealing with all season? I'm going to look into it on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade, and I appreciate that you've all made Locked On Boston College your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. This is our post-game episode, and not one that I think a lot of folks are looking forward to talk about because BC just lost to Michigan State 42-40 in double overtime. This was a game that BC had every opportunity to win. They had, Dylan Lonergan looking, like John Elway out there at one point, just hitting all his passes, looking great. They were up at halftime and they were looking okay. And then the second half, Michigan State makes adjustments on their defense. Dylan Lonergan starts to struggle. And then Aiden Childs takes over. 5 touchdowns for the Michigan State quarterback. That's quite the output for him today. He gave BC trouble last year. We saw it again today. So let's just dive into this. BC, the first drive I watched and I was going, oh man, BC's in trouble, because that first drive, Lonergan looked overwhelmed and just like the lights were bright, right? They punt it, and what happens? Michigan State gives the ball right back to them. Fumbles it on the punt return. I think one of their own guys hit their own, two guys on their own team hit each other. Owen McGowan picks it up. Great. Gives you an opportunity to adjust. BC looks good. They move, they make a couple of plays, and then Turbo Richard goes to, he gets the ball, and he gets the ball and tries to run it in and gets to the 1 yard line and fumbles it into the end zone. Second big issue. So, Michigan State jumps out. They take an early lead. And that's where things start to you're starting to feel it, and you're going to yourself, this is going to be an issue. This is going to be, problems, because the first drive that they score, it was, you could see that there were issues coming up with this defense. And that was something that I'm not going to go over every play in this game, because that's not really what this point of this is. But we got to call it what it is. The defensive line was not good in this game at all. Q Hutchins had one really good drive, but I was saying to myself watching this, where is Q? Like, he was just invisible until that one drive before the end of regulation. But the other guys, Quan Williams had a play here. Sid McConnell had a play. But in terms of pass rush, they really didn't. There were times where Aiden Childs would back out. He would, he was taking it under center. I know some of you guys really wish you have that here. He goes back, and it's like there's nothing moving in front of him. There's no pressure. The offensive line is just pushing and holding him there. So there was a lot of that in this game. So that was one of my big issues with this game, was just the defensive line. And I didn't see much of the linebackers either. Bam had one play, I think, early, but he was also pretty invisible too. So that just made everything harder for the back end of this defense. So, you can have a great secondary, but if the front seven is not doing anything, it doesn't help. Additionally, your defense is also going to struggle when you can't bring a guy down. And that was a major, major problem with Aiden Childs. How many times did KP Price come flying in and try to hit him, or Omar Thornton, and they would, grab him by the ankles and he would square away and get a first down? It happened multiple times. And then, of course, and I'm not going to actually, and you guys are going to hate me for saying this, I'm not going to blame Amari Jackson for this, but when they could not, the first touchdown, when Nick Marsh dragged Amari Jackson into the end zone, he was like 8 yards out and dragged him all the way in. That Nick Marsh is really good. So I'm not going to bust them on that one. There was plenty other plays you can get mad at them about. But that play, kind of epitomized, I think, what a lot of fans were saying, like, why, we're not hitting well. What's going on here? So the tackling, I thought, was the big issue. The other big issue that we saw in this loss was special teams. Again, punting, fine. Kicking, they kick field goals. It made me want to projectile vomit at times because I was just so nervous watching it because you've all been Boston College fans long enough to know how some of these go. But Luca Lombardo hit what he had to hit. Punt returns. Okay, let's start with that first before I get into the other issue with special teams. You're going against Eckley, who's a preseason All-American punter. The first time you let it happen, where he punts it and they down it at the 1 yard line, you should have learned your lesson. They're letting it, they're waving off punts at the 20 and letting it roll. That's dangerous. You should only be waving those off if you're at the the 10. But BC gets pinned back to the 1. Luckily, they got out of that one. He does it again at the end of the game regulation. When BC makes that big stop to stop Childs at the end of regulation, he punts it again. And then you have 30 seconds left. You don't go under center because that's not what you do. And again, you are risking a safety. That was a big issue. The bigger issue was the place kicking and not place kicking, the coverage on kickoffs. The first one, 63-yard kickoff return after you just scored a touchdown. Talk about taking the sails out of your offense, man. You just had a clinical drive with Dylan Lonergan. He just lit up that defense, and then 63 yards, boom. And they do it again later in the game. So my big question for that, okay, special teams, again, you're playing complementary football. That's what you're shooting for. Why is it always an issue? You got your punting down now. You've got a kicker. Now it's this, because remember, against Fordham, they had the exact same issue. Charlie Camella made a big save to stop a touchdown return. You got to get better there. That's inexcusable. You cannot have those issues on special teams. So that was a big problem on that end too. And then, my one other gripe with this game, other than the defensive line not playing well and linebackers being invisible, was I saw Bud Elliott of Cover 2 podcast say the same thing. I really wish BC went for 2 in that first overtime. Just go for the win. The odds are better. I don't know the statistics. We'll get Mitch Wolf on here again to talk about that, but the odds are better that you would just hit that pass and then just end the game. I wish they did that. Because your defense wasn't stopping anything, and you knew at some point either you're going to make that play or you're not. And let's just try it now. Let's not make our defense go back out there and see what we did, at the end of that game. So it was a thriller, 2 overtimes. You love to see that they fought and that it was close, but close ain't good enough. Close still gives you a loss, and close, you're still leaving this game with lots of question marks. You feel better in some sense because you definitely have a quarterback, and we'll talk about him in segment number 2. But the question marks are much more glaring. Penalties. That was the other thing. Let me pull it up, but the penalties were a lot more pronounced than the first game, where you saw, BC I think they only had 1 in the first game. They had 8 for 59 yards in this game, including a 5-yard penalty. It didn't matter because they scored a touchdown in overtime anyways, but they also pushed themselves out of going forward on 4th down range early in the game too, where they ended up kicking a field goal. So you saw some penalties pop up. Those were other issues that drove me crazy. But I want to also talk a little positivity, and then we'll, on our final segment, talk about how this changes how I view the season. Let's get into what Dylan Lonergan did in just a moment. You can just move through life, or you can find the things that move you. It's your choice. You can choose to get out there, choose your people. You can choose to go for it, really go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda, move and be moved. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm sorry I'm not behind my usual studio. I'm away for the weekend again. And I want to talk about Dylan Lonergan. Let's get into his game. So Lonergan's final stats, I'm going to pull them up right now. 35, 4 for 45, 4 touchdowns, and 390 yards. He's going to be the leader probably after this week. I'm guessing. I haven't really looked at any of the stats, but easily going to be the leader in passing yards. On one hand, that's great. On the other, you wish the rushing game was a little bit more complimentary than we saw. It wasn't it was bad at points, but it got better as the game goes on. And in second overtime, you scored on a touchdown by Turbo, but they only ran 25 times for 67 yards. Like, really, some people joke that BC went air raid, and they kind of lightly did that. It wasn't completely that. I thought Lonergan, for a first-time starter in enemy territory, this is his first true road game. I thought he looked really good. Like, they were going into halftime. Like, they're talking about him like he's Tom Brady, which I was like, whoa, guys, slow down. He's taking advantage of some things out there, and let's pump our brakes. And obviously, this third quarter, he was struggling a lot more at that point. I thought, for a quarterback, though, you see that BC has him for 3 seasons, this season and 2 more. That is a privilege that we're going to be able to look forward to. What I loved about him is what I said about him all during camp, is that he is as cool as a cucumber when he's out there. This is a guy that doesn't get rattled at all. Like, he'll make a mistake and just get back up and keep, doing what he has to do. Watching him out there, you could see the real big differences, and I've mentioned this on the show before, between him and previous quarterbacks, like the one down in Florida State and even Grayson James. He sees the field so much faster and sees what he needs to do so much faster than any of those quarterbacks. Like, he is just lightning quick with his reads. And it does remind me, and I know they keep bringing up Brady, but it does remind me of that kind of style of offense that you're doing, where it's just get the ball out quick, because that was always what made Brady so great. And Dylan Lonergan's not Tom Brady. I'm not saying he is, but he does do that really well. And that's going to help. That's why the offensive line may struggle again in run defense. Run support. And we saw that again today. But he gets the ball out so fast that you can't really get a pass rush on him because the ball's out so quick. So, he wasn't perfect. And there were some drops in there that didn't help either. He was nearly perfect at halftime if you take out the drops. But there were times where he struggled. And obviously that double overtime, 2-point conversion is a play you wish he'd have back, because that was, even if he caught that, I don't think he was in. So that was a mistake too. But as much as we're going to be, I think a lot of folks are going to get back into that BC mindset where we just lose big games and this is what we do and, everything. It's hard to not look at Dylan Lonergan and say, if they can fix and tweak a few things, if you really do trust that Bill O'Brien can adjust a few things to get things to work, they have something special at quarterback. You got a guy that's thrown for almost 800 yards in your first 2 games. He's thrown for 9 touchdowns, whatever it is, and looked very good. And so that, I think, is a positive to look at, because you can design an offense around what he does well. Remember, there's times, if you're going back to comparing this to the Patriots again, there were times where the Pats really didn't focus on the run game, and they were able to get away with that. I think BC might have to think about that a little bit. You do enough running to keep it honest, but you also use your running backs in different ways. I got to say this, other than that fumble, I thought Turbo had a pretty good game, especially in the pass game. He was probably one of the most complete backs I've seen. He gets the ball, he does what he needs to do, and I think that was pretty effective. So I liked Lonergan. I thought he got a little rattled in that third quarter. But if your main takeaway is to focus on one quarter where he looked a little rattled, you're missing the point here. This is a kid, again, who made his first road start. You know how many people have gone and done that, and it's a complete disaster? You could go. There's tons of them out there, right? It's not uncommon, and it's at Michigan State. There's 77,000 fans there. They're raucous. They're loud. That's what they do. right? And he just kept it calm and cool. So that piece impressed me. Additionally, things that impressed me about this game, Jeremiah Franklin, I hated seeing, he had no drops last year. I thought that was a cool stat that I have always gone back to. I even asked about it during the summer. And what does he do in this game? He gets his first drop. He also gets a touchdown, so that's cool. I thought he had a pretty good game. Ty Lockwood, who was kind of quiet he played against Fordham. He had no stat line, but he had a catch. I think he also had, I think he might have had a drop too. That was bad. But the other name that came up is I'm really curious how VJ Wilkins is going to be used in this offense, because it's 2 weeks in a row now where you see him pop up like maybe for a handful of snaps, and it's always to take the top off the defense. And he did it again this week. And it's great to see with him, because I was worrying he was going to be the next Jaden McGowan, where you have a lot of hope for him. You think, this is the next speedy guy that you're going to bring in. He's going to do a lot of great things for you. And then he'll do nothing. Because I got to tell you, during the summer, I did not see him do much of anything. He had a great spring, like a tremendous spring. Seeing him during the summer, he wasn't doing nothing again. I'm like, oh my gosh, is VJ Wilkins going to really just fade into the background? He had a nice big catch in this game too. So that was impressive. Play calling, it is what it is. I thought, folks were complaining last week about it being too vanilla. The running game was too vanilla. Will Long tried some new things in this game. We saw him do, there was end arounds with Reed Harris and Lewis Bond. They tried, it didn't work. So I'm not sure. Mitch Wolf will do the film update on this and see what the line looked like. If there's one particular guy, watching it on TV, it's impossible to tell if there's an offensive lineman that's having issues out there. And, that'll be up to Applebaum and O'Brien to look at, see if do you have to put in a new tackle like Ryan McGow or Michael Crowns at center? Dwayne Alec got called for 2 false starts as a center. That's not good. So big piece of this is what we're going to talk about in our final segment. What is our takeaways from this game, and how does it change the outlook on the season? Is BC still looking good to get into a bowl game, or are these problems going to really rear their ugly head and cost them more games? I'll talk about all of those in just a moment. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Boston College, Dylan Lonergan delivered in a big way. He had 4 touchdowns in this game. He really single-handedly kept BC in a game where, Michigan State was playing at a much higher level at a bunch of different other positions. And just like Dylan Lonergan, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday on your order. Stack it all up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every single day. And check out Locked On ACC. I'm sure they're going to have some thoughts about this, and probably going to talk about that Virginia Tech game where Virginia Tech looks completely lost. I don't know how Brent Pry is going to make it through this season, but we're not talking about them today. This is about BC. So final thoughts on this. Does this change my outlook for BC this season? Not really, because I still see them as a 6 or 7 win team. I think Dylan Lonergan's going to win them games. I think that's the important part of this, is that they're going to win them games. I'm worried the defense is going to lose them games, though, because I don't think there's enough talent. And I think that's going to be a big issue for BC. You go back 2 years to looking at BC's defensive edge rushers. It was Donovan Azaraku, and then it was nothing. Like, they really didn't have anybody. Edwin Kalingi played a little bit. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing right now, but you just don't have an edge that's as good as Azaraku. Like, Quintavious Hutchins is fine, but your second edge rusher was completely invisible for most of the game, whether it was Bate or Kalengi. They were Jason Flynn, I saw out there at different points. They were rotating a ton of guys out in that game, but it wasn't working. So I look at the lack of pass rush. They were trying at different times. And, Aiden Childs, I think, does provide a specific challenge for BC because he's a big dude, and he's mobile, so he's able to do that kind of stuff. But I worry the defense is going to cause them issues. But I look ahead. Stanford, there's no reason that Dylan Lonergan can't do what he did tonight against them. I mean, really, I don't care if it's at night. I don't care if it's a 10:30 start. They really should win that. But then I look at Cal. Cal has that quarterback, and I will learn his name soon, I promise you. Watching him worries me. It worries me because he's the exact same style of like mobile quarterback who's got a good arm that could light up BC. Now it's at home, so BC's going to have to clean some stuff up. This is where you have to either believe that Bill O'Brien can try to fix things or believe that there's just too many gaps, that there's, you can't fix everything with one coach. And I don't know where that answer is. So I look ahead, and there's games on there where a big Dylan Lonergan game could help them win. I watched Louisville, and I was not at all impressed with them. Miller Moss barely won them that game. I look at Syracuse. Again, they're a mess. They barely beat UConn. I think they're still doing wind sprints because Fran Brown threw them out there. Pitt, same thing. Like, you could score on these teams, but will your defense do enough? So that's the piece where I think we're going to have to wait and see. This was encouraging in some ways, but really in the end, not really, because like now you see the glaring hole, and it's that defensive front. They got to get better, and they got to figure out the guys that can do that. I thought, I'd love to see Quan Williams and Owens, Seth McConnell play, because I think they're both good players. We don't know what's going on with Owen Stodmeyer. He got hurt. They said arm injury. Hopefully we'll find out more about that from Bill this week. And Amari Jackson got hurt. And that's a bummer because he just came back from a knee injury. So you had a couple of guys get dinged up. But all in all, like, you leave the game and it's not the biggest loss in terms of injuries, because Stodmeyer, I'm telling you, I was not expecting him to do much of anything. I know he was cleared, but I thought maybe like a small role play, but he's gone for a while. I don't know how long he'll be out. We'll have to wait to see. And Jackson, like, play Max Tucker. You got guys there, and Ashton McShane hopefully will be back soon too. So you got a couple guys there that can fill that in. So I still think this is a bowl eligible team. I think they're good enough, and I think Lonergan is going to win them some games. I think also this defense is going to make us tear our hair out at times. And I don't know how, you find an answer in season unless you have the talent here, because the guys that you have, they were trying a whole bunch of them out there, and they just, as I said earlier, like watching that offensive line just kind of stand there and hold them, and it was not moving at all, made me gasp. And that happened quite a few times. So they got to figure things out. And, Lewis tried some, I heard some people like ripping him. You can only do things with what you have. And he tried some things. We saw Omar Thornton and KP Price come after him. We saw Bam Crouch come on a blitz, and it seemed like no matter what they were doing, Michigan State a lot of times was picking it up. They didn't, there were a few points where they were able to get home, but for the most part, it was not working. So that was a big issue. So it was a 50-50 game. This was a game I said was super important for BC, and I still stand on that. I think it's a critical loss for the Eagles, and one that they could have won. I mean, you go back to that turbo fumble, they score there, and really set the tone. They could have won this game. They later in the game when things were, when they go for the field goal and weren't able to punch it in down that end, that would have been great. There was a few other little things here and there, but like this game was there for them. They could have won it and they didn't. Disappointing. It's the only way to put it. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again on Monday for a recorded show with Mitch Wolf. We'll get Mitch's take on this. He's always more measured than me, but we'll get into that. And thank you all who are in the comment section. I could see that there's a ton. I don't really read them because I just find them too distracting when I'm on the show, but I'll read them after I get off the air. But thank you all for putting them up there, and thank you for joining us. If you have not done so already, hit that like and subscribe button before you leave. It does help with the YouTube algorithm and gets new people to find Locked On BC. Thank you all again, and I'll see you on Monday for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.